Hey guys, I am back to read chapters 2 and 3 of our A to Z Mysteries book, The Canary Caper, by Ron Roy. Chapter 2. Early the next morning, Ruth Rose poked her head into Dink's tent. "Wake up, you guys!" Dink shot up out of a sound sleep. "Did Tiger come back?" he asked, peering sleepily at Ruth Rose. "No, she didn't. I'm going to the police station. I want you guys to come with me." Josh rolled over in his sleeping bag. "To report a missing cat?" "No, to report a missing cat and a missing canary," Ruth Rose said. Then she ducked back out of the tent. Dink and Josh looked at each other, then crawled out after her. Ruth Rose was pacing back and forth across the lawn. "Guys, it's just too weird," she said. "Two animals disappeared from the same street on the same day." Ruth Rose stopped pacing and looked at them. "I don't think Mozart and Tiger wandered off. I think they were stolen. I'm taking Nate home, and then you guys are coming with me to talk to Officer Fallon." Ruth Rose woke up Nate, took his hand, and marched toward her house. Dink and Josh looked at each other and shrugged. Then they walked into Dink's house. Josh poured 2 bowls of cereal while Dink ran up to his room to change. Loretta, his guinea pig, squeaked a hello to Dink from her cage. Josh was slurping up his wheat treats when Dink came back down. "I've been thinking," Josh said. "Wouldn't Tiger eat Mozart if someone kidnapped them both?" Dink shrugged. "I don't know. I'm not even sure that Tiger and Mozart were kidnapped," he said between bites. "But Ruth Rose is our friend, so let's go to the police station with her." Ruth Rose walked in wearing blue shorts and a red shirt. "You guys ready to go?" she said. Dink stared. He'd never seen Ruth Rose wear 2 different colors at the same time. He gave Josh a look, but Josh was busy reading the back of the cereal box and didn't notice. "Yep, we're ready," Dink said, putting the bowls and glasses in the sink. They found Officer Fallon at his desk. He was typing at his computer, chewing gum and sipping tea all at the same time. "Well, hi, gang," he said, smiling at the kids. "Going to the circus this weekend? How about some free passes?" "No thanks, we went yesterday," Dink said. Officer Fallon handed Josh 3 tickets. "Go again, on the Green Lawn Police." "Officer Fallon, I have a problem," Ruth Rose said. He pointed at some chairs. "Have a seat, I'm all ears." "It's my cat, Tiger. She's been gone for a whole day and night," Ruth Rose said. "She's never been away from home that long. Mrs. Davis's canary disappeared, too." Dink had never seen Ruth Rose look or sound so serious. Officer Fallon wrote something on a sheet of paper. "I think someone in Green Lawn is stealing pets," Ruth Rose went on. 2 pets vanishing on the same day is just too weird." 4 pets, Officer Fallon said. He opened his drawer and pulled out a sheet of paper. 4 pets are missing. 4? Dink and Josh said together. Officer Fallon nodded. "Last night, Dr. Pardue called. His kid's rabbit was missing from its cage. Later, Mrs. Gwynn called. It seems her parrot disappeared off her back porch." "All yesterday?" Dink asked. Officer Fallon nodded. "I was right," Ruth Rose said, jumping up to her feet. "There is a pet napper around here." 4 animals disappearing on the same day does seem strange, Officer Fallon said. "In fact, I've already asked Officer Keene to look into it." He looked at Ruth Rose. "Could it be that your cat just took a little vacation, Ruth Rose? I used to have a cat who was a real wanderer." "Well, Tiger isn't," Ruth Rose answered firmly. Officer Fallon nodded. He told the kids he'd let them know if he discovered anything. The kids left the police station and walked toward Main Street. "Sounds like you might be right, Ruth Rose," Dink said. "Maybe we should go see Mrs. Wong just in case," Josh suggested. "People always bring her stray animals. Maybe someone found Tiger and brought her to the pet shop." Ruth Rose rewarded Josh with a huge smile. "Great idea, Josh." They passed Howard's barber shop. Howard was out front sweeping a sidewalk. "Have you seen my big orange cat?" Ruth Rose called. Howard shook his head. "Sorry, Ruth Rose." At the Furry Feet pet shop, Mrs. Wong told Ruth Rose the same thing. Nobody brought Tiger in, she said, but I'll keep my eyes peeled. Mrs. Davis's canary is gone too, Dink told Mrs. Wong, and Dr. Pardieu's rabbit and Mrs. Gwynn's parrot, Josh said. 4 animals are missing? That is very strange, Mrs. Wong glanced around her shop. I guess I should count my own critters. May I use your phone, Mrs. Wong? Ruth Rose asked. I want to call my mom and see if Tiger's home yet. Help yourself, Mrs. Wong said. Ruth Rose dialed, spoke quietly to her mother, then hung up. Tiger's still gone, she said. Who'd want to steal a canary, a cat, a parrot, and a rabbit? I don't know, Dink said, but we're going to find out. Chapter 3. The kids left the pet shop and headed up Main Street. They walked slowly, thinking about what to do. I've read about scientists stealing animals to use in experiments, Josh said. That's awful, Dink said. I don't want Tiger used... I don't want Tiger used in some experiment, said Ruth Rose. We have to find those animals. Where do the Gwynns and the Pardieus live? The Gwynns live over by us on Thistle Court, Dink said. Why don't we go talk to them, Ruth Rose said. Maybe the pet napper left some clues. The kids cut through the high school grounds and past the circus trailers. A few of the workers were sitting at a picnic table drinking coffee. They waved when the kids walked by. Which house is the Gwynns? Ruth Rose asked when they reached Thistle Court. That big gray one, Josh said. The mailbox in front said Gwynn in black letters. Ruth Rose walked up the steps and rang the doorbell. Mrs. Gwynn opened the door. Hi, kids. How's your summer so far? She asked. Not so great, Ruth Rose said. Someone stole my cat yesterday. Oh, Ruth Rose, how awful. My parrot disappeared yesterday, too. So did Mrs. Davis's canary, Josh added. We just came from the police station, Dink put in. Officer Fallon told us about your parrot. Dr. Pardieu's rabbit is also missing. Mrs. Gwynn's mouth fell open. My goodness, do you mean to say that 4 pets disappeared yesterday? We think so, Ruth Rose said. Where was your parrot when you last saw him? On my back porch in his cage, Mrs. Gwynn said. Can we see the cage? Dink asked. Mrs. Gwynn took them through the kitchen to a screened-in back porch. A cage stood in one corner. Archie likes it out here, said Mrs. Gwynn. He can watch the other birds in the trees. Yesterday I came out to have my lunch, but he was gone. Dink checked the screen door that led to the backyard. Was this locked? He asked. I don't really remember. We often leave it unlocked, Mrs. Gwynn said. Could Archie have opened his cage door himself? Josh asked. Mrs. Gwynn shook her head. We always keep a clothespin on his door to make sure he can't open it. So someone must have stolen him, Ruth Rose said. Oh dear, I don't like to think of crime in Green Lawn, Mrs. Gwynn said with a sigh. Can I offer you some kids something to drink? It's pretty warm. No thanks, Ruth Rose said, but do you mind if we look in your phone book for Dr. Pardieu's address? They're at number 3 Pheasant Lane, Mrs. Gwynn said. I dropped Mike off there to play tennis with Andy Pardieu. The kids thanked Mrs. Gwynn and hurried to Main Street. This is getting weirder and weirder, Dink said. A canary and a parrot were snatched right out of their cages in broad daylight, with people home. And Tiger was probably in my backyard when she was taken, Ruth Rose said. They waved to Mr. Paskey in the book nook and headed up Aviary Way. 3 Pheasant Lane was a big greenhouse surrounded by tall trees. A kid holding a tennis racket was sitting on the front porch. Hi, Ruth Rose said, walking up to the porch. Is Dr. Pardieu home? We'd like to talk to him about his rabbit. I'm Andy Pardieu, the kid said. Violet's my rabbit. Why, did you find her? No, but my cat is missing too, Ruth Rose said, and so are 2 other pets in town. Dink glanced around the Pardieu's front yard. When did your rabbit disappear? He asked Andy. After lunch yesterday, he said. My sister ran into the house screaming. I went out to the cage and the door was wide open. Violet was gone. Can you show us the cage? Ruth Rose asked. Andy led them to the backyard. An empty rabbit hutch stood under a tree. Was the cage locked? Josh asked. Yep, I lock it every night myself. Andy Pardieu gave them a sharp look. What's going on anyway? A ring of animal thieves? That's what we're trying to find out, Dink said. Well, let me know what you dig up, said Andy. Boy, I'd like to get my hands on the creep who did this. My little sister cried all night. The kids walked back to Woody Street. Let's stop and check in with Mrs. Davis, Dink suggested as they passed her house. We should tell her about the other missing animals. When Mrs. Davis opened her door, she had a big smile on her face. Oh, I'm so glad to see you three, she exclaimed. You'll never guess. A man just called. He said he found Mozart. He's bringing him here at 6:30. Isn't that lovely? That's great, Dink looked at Josh and Ruth Rose in surprise. I want you three to be here since you were kind enough to look for him, Mrs. Davis continued. Afterward, we'll have some of my strawberry shortcake to celebrate. Super, Josh said. We'll see you at 6:30, Dink said with a wave. The three started home. Josh grinned. I guess Mozart wasn't kidnapped after all. I guess not, Dink said. He looked at Ruth Rose. She wasn't smiling. There's one thing I don't understand, she finally said. How did he know who to call? How did that man know who Mozart belonged to? Dink shrugged. Maybe he found him near Mrs. Davis's house and asked one of her neighbors. Or, Ruth Rose said, maybe the guy who called is the same guy who took Mozart. But that doesn't make any sense, Dink said. Why would someone steal a canary on Thursday and return it the next day? For the reward, Ruth Rose said with a frown. This guy steals pets, then returns them for money. Dink and Josh just stared at Ruth Rose. They walked the rest of the way home in silence. That is the end of Chapter 3. Join me tomorrow for Chapters 4 and 5.